everyone. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight to talk about the topic of answering difficult and or illegal interview questions. My name's Jody Hammer, and I'll be your host for the evening. And I work actually at the National Peace Corps Association. I work in the Global Reentry department, and my job is to help you, the RPCV population, with your job searches and career questions and topics. And so this is a topic that's definitely been recommended by people, and it's a good topic. So I'm excited to be here with you. I want to give you a little bit of a warning, or not a warning, just a forecast, if you will. I am hoping that one or more of you might be brave enough to actually do a little bit of a mock interview with some of the questions to make it as interactive as possible. And if you do that, I'll be able to give you very tailored advice on, what worked, what you might tweak to make it the most effective as possible. So just have that in the back of your mind. And if you're willing to potentially participate, maybe, let us know in the chat box would be fine as well. So as we begin this session, I would like to invite you to put in to go ahead and write in the chat box any of maybe the most difficult question or questions that you've ever gotten in an interview, or maybe that you've heard, other close friends of yours have gotten. If you can go ahead and do that, that would be great. I'm going to open my chat box as well. And I have Lexi, my colleague, is here as well, and she's great. She's going to help as well make sure that we get all of your questions answered. So she'll help kind of monitor the chat box as well. So just drop in there, what is the most difficult question or questions, if you can't decide, that you've ever gotten in a job interview. Let's see what we got here. Oh, why did you leave your last job? Great, Laura. And actually, we're going to cover that very one in detail. I have a slide that's dedicated to it, actually. So wonderful. Maybe you would be so brave. I know you, Laura, and you're awesome, to be willing to maybe mock that with me for folks. After we go through tips and such. So questions about salary expectations. Yeah, those are never fun. Absolutely not. And with that one, while we're waiting for a couple of the other things to come in, I'll just answer a little bit with the salary expectations. I always recommend that you hear from them first what the salary range is before you give your requirements, if at all possible. It's not always possible. Sometimes they insist on you giving that. But what oftentimes I recommend for people, even if they request them like in advance when you're applying for a job, they'll want your salary expectations in your cover letter, to address the concept, to let them know that I didn't forget. I'm doing what you asked me to do, so I'm following directions. But saying something more generic, like, with regard to salary expectations, I'm looking for a salary that is commensurate with my, and then prove 3 years of specialized experience in da 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 da, and make that very tailored to that job, like what they're wanting, right? Happy to provide a more detailed figure upon learning the projected range and other ancillary benefits, right? Because a lot of times other benefits are just as important, right, as salary. You may not have as high of a salary, but you have such good health insurance with zero copay, zero, it's just, that can be worth a lot as well. So great. Wonderful. And we have the describe your area, some areas you need to improve on. Yep, the weakness question. Of course, I knew that would come out, Jennifer, because that's always I think of every question, of all questions, the weakness question is probably the one that people dread the most. So we'll definitely be spending some time on that as well. But I wanted to tailor this to really make sure that we spend time on your questions that you have. So great. We've got some other ones coming in here as well, and we'll make sure to, the behavioral questions we're going to talk a lot about, and practice, and how to best reply. And then we'll do, hopefully, like I said, some role playing if folks are willing to be so brave. What technical experience do you have? For a program manager, experience not in the field. Yep, talking about different fields, right? Yeah, excellent. Yeah, right. And you said they didn't elaborate what they meant. And just to remind you, it is actually okay. It's perfectly okay to, if you're not sure what they mean in a, if you're in an interview, to make sure that you are addressing it in the way they want. You could certainly say, certainly, I guess I want to clarify one thing in terms of technical. What specific aspects of the technical experience are you referring to? I just want to make sure that my answer will you know fulfill your request, like just putting it back, like you want to make sure you do a good job for them, right, to answer in the way that they're wanting that experience, what experience they're assessing in that. So you can always do that too, which is good. Great. So we've got some good ones. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate this. Name a time you failed. Great one, related to, yep, the weaknesses, the failed, the negative things that none of us really want to talk about, because it's uncomfortable. But yeah, no problem. That's awesome. Okay. So we'll come back to these because several of them we're going to have already addressed, and those that we haven't, we can certainly come back to then a little bit later. And actually I'll be happy to give you, more information on that as well. So let's go ahead and just start. What I wanted to ask first is, you get that interview, right? And it's congratulations. Wow, it is congratulations, because that means that you are one of the top candidates, probably maybe three people, maybe five, but generally it's not more than that. So that right there, I hope that you all can take that in when you get that interview and be like, yes, I made it to the top, which in and of itself is fabulous. And then of course, you want to get the job offer, oftentimes or most times, right? So I always, it's so why are you so stressed, right? You've just gotten the interview, you're one of the best of the best. You're stressed because what? I mean, throw it in the chat box. There's a lot on the line, right? I mean, you're, here, yes, you're at that final stage, but now it's like, okay, it's the end. I can see that end possibly, right? I might get this job actually, but I can't mess up the interview. And so a lot of people go into that whole, oh my gosh, everything rides on this interview. And, what if I don't do well? And, the what if world, and that loss of confidence in yourself and your abilities and all of that. So we're going to talk. I'm very quickly going to go through some of the important slides that really relate to like difficult interview questions, from the regular interview type of presentation when you're talking about a regular interview. So I always remind folks that the purpose of the job interview is two-way, and I say this because I want to take the pressure off them a little bit, right? So it's to allow the employer to assess the candidate, right? Their skills and their fit in the organizational culture, all of that, right? But it also allows the candidate to get a better view and more inside, scoop, if you will, on the organization to see if they're really interested in it, right? And I'm sure, many of you have probably had an interview where after the interview, you walked out saying, oh my gosh, I would not take this job ever. Like it totally changed your mind, right? I mean, that happens. If it has happened to you, just raise your hand in the, or whatever in the participant, where we have all the participants listed. It's very common that happens, right? So I just like to remind folks of that because I want them to not be so incredibly where it's, they're just so nervous because it's like, this is everything and I need to get this job. And, it's like, hey, yes, it's a conversation with the employer and or some other, maybe there's other panelists that are there too, but it's to just talk more about you, you share about you and you learn about them. And so kind of, try to take that pressure off yourself. But obviously you want to do a good job. So you're going to really work hard to prepare. And I totally get that, right? So you've all put your answers in there. If you do have other ones that you come up with that you think of that are difficult interview questions that you maybe feel you need help with, drop them in the chat box and we'll definitely get to as many of those as we can throughout the night. Okay. So a couple of the tips for answering questions in general, right? And we're going to talk a lot about behavioral questions, and what they are and, how to answer them and all of that too. But, when you're answering their questions, you want to preface your response. And I have a whole slide on this that's next that I'm going to go through very quickly with you. But basically what that does is it sets the context and the depth of your experience so that it's helpful, because to them it tells them how much experience you have. Maybe you indicate you have 3 years of specialized experience or whatever it is. And then you go into that example, for example, and you go into the example, you give that, but you quantify too. So prove your answer, right? Prove your experience. So, it might be, in addition to the 3 years or however many years you have in it, it might be, the outcome, put the outcomes, talk about the so what. I oftentimes write at the bottom of the paper, right? So what? Like, why is this important? You're telling me this experience because why? Oh, because you achieved a 25% increase in da, 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 whatever it is, right? Or sales or what, anything that you can quantify. It's great to have some of those numbers in your answer, because it makes it more believable because you're quantifying, right? It's less likely that you're lying if you're giving these like specific numbers and quoting and things like that. And you're not going to lie, obviously, ever anyway. But maintain eye contact. Now today, obviously, we have the Zoom and other platforms for your virtual interviews. Keep that good eye contact with your camera, not with the face that shows up on the screen, but with your camera, because when you're looking at the camera, you're going to look like you're looking at them. So, those kind of things are really important. Put a little note next to it that says, smile, or whatever, so that you keep, or just smiley face or something, right next to it, so that it reminds you to look there. Keep your answers fairly succinct, right? You don't want to go on, for 20 minutes on answering a question, right? There's going to be several questions and you want to prove to them that you can make a concise, but yet elaborate, right? You want to elaborate to the extent that you need to prove that skill set, right? But it certainly shouldn't take you, many minutes, right? And then just that's how when you answer those questions, that's going to help you, right? The next one is going to be just on prefacing, and I just stole this from my other interviewing that I had done an interviewing workshop earlier, a webinar. But it sets the context, right, and the extent of your experience, instead of just jumping straight into the example, right? So if they asked you, about your experience in, event planning is the example that I'm putting here, right? So you can then say, and you can say something like, sure, I have 3 years of direct experience in event planning. Most recently in my job as da, 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 and then you go into that example, right? Instead of just going right into that, sure, when I was working with da, 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 and just going right into the example, right? You're just putting right up there, right up front. I have 3 years of direct experience in this. That's a great way to do it, prefacing, for a number of reasons. One, what if they don't like your example that you share? Well, you've already said, I have 3 years of direct experience in this, so it's easier for them to be more forgiving, right? Two, it's like it pops it. It's like, boom, she has it. So they're almost all, I mean, they should be still listening to your example and all of that, but they've got the numbers. They're able to kind of check it off almost, more mentally before it's even finished, which is nice too. It takes a little more of the pressure off, right? So prefacing, I hope that people understand what I mean when I say prefacing. It's the number one tip I give for interviewing, is prefacing your responses. And this becomes really important with like behavioral questions, right? That's when it's more used. Tell me about a time you used your da, 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 experience. And then you come back with that preface, right? You don't always want to preface the same way. You wouldn't always want to say, sure, I have X years of experience in X. You'd want to, maybe swap it up and be like, absolutely, I've proven my abilities and competencies in whatever da, 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 in each of the past jobs I've held, or each of the past 3 jobs I've held. One experience would be, and then you go into your experience, right? So you do swap it up some. So if you don't understand prefacing, you jot something in the comments, and I'm just going to go through here because I want to make sure we have enough time to do this. So with the behavioral interview questions, which I was alluding to, right? Those are the ones that are going to be asked most commonly to assess your technical expertise or experience in the areas, the skill sets that they're looking for, right? Because and what you want to do with this, obviously, with the behavioral questions, is study the job description. Go back to that and look at what are the technical skills they're wanting you to have, and sometimes too the soft skills, right? The skills like, ability, intercultural skills, or things like that. And so be prepared to answer questions on those. I recommend that you actually write out, but not write out verbatim, but rather write bullets like, oh, okay, so one of them is intercultural communication, right? So write the bullet, Peace Corps, village, da 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 da, whatever, or little prompts that are going to remind you, because what's going to happen is, and I highly recommend that you practice for these difficult interview questions, right? For any interview questions, all. But when you do that, if you're writing down a lot of people, like, I'm going to script it because I can memorize it and then I know that I'll say it right. Trust me, they can generally tell when you are reading. Or even not reading, just rehearsing from, like quoting, right? It doesn't have the same, I don't know, the conversational tone. So if you have your little cheat sheet and you kind of memorize the cheat sheet part, then practice saying it some, right? Obviously, but for your, don't write it out verbatim and try to memorize it. It's not as effective. So, enough said on that. But these are the questions that obviously, we'll start. They can't be answered with yes, no only, right? It's asking for an example. So it might be, tell me about a time you utilized these skills in a team environment, or share with me, we're looking for very strong, whatever skills, communication skills. Give me an example of how you've proven your communication skills in your previous job or jobs, right? So things like that, right? So it's basically, you need to provide an example to like prove your competency. And that's what I'm talking about when I say go through and not script, but just kind of for each of the skills they're looking for, try to have, a different example so that you can show them a variety as much as possible, right? In other words, don't always do Peace Corps. I know we're all RPCVs. We're proud of our Peace Corps service, and rightfully so. And that was a huge transformative experience. But if you have other experiences, please use them as well. Maybe you use more of the Peace Corps ones, but you don't want to come across as like Peace Corps, Peace Corps, Peace Corps, Peace Corps, just Peace Corps. That can get old as well. Okay. So an example might be, tell me about a time you've dealt with conflict in a team environment and how you handled it. And I'm wondering if there's any volunteer here who might be willing to actually mock that question with me. Is there anyone who would be willing to do that? You'll get some detailed feedback, and if you're willing to do it. So again, the question is, tell me about a time you dealt with conflict in a team environment and how you handled it. So anyone who is willing to, if you want to just either raise your hand, and Lexi can, or you can just even unmute. I think we're small enough that you could probably even just unmute and tell me that you're willing to do it. Oh, come on, guys. Be brave.
Jody, I can think of an example, but not in a team environment. I can think of an example with the supervisor.
Sure. Oh, that would be great. That's fine. So great, Laura. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So Laura, I'll change it here, and I'm going to ask you, tell me about a time you dealt with conflict with a supervisor, a past supervisor, and how you handled it.
Sure, but I am going to use a Peace Corps example. Sorry. This has worked.
Oh, no, it's fine. Peace Corps is great.
I've used this example before, and it was a good one, but great. It was from way back when. So as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Philippines, I often organized workshops for other teachers in my school and the district. And there was one workshop that had been rescheduled already multiple times. And it was, if we couldn't have it the day that it was planned for, it wouldn't be happening for the rest of the year because of various schedule constraints. So I was highly motivated to go ahead with the date we had selected and agreed on in advance.
Sure.
The day of the workshop, it was a Saturday morning. The day arrived and there was a typhoon warning that day.
Oh my.
So, and that's, typhoons are common where I served in the Philippines. Um, but my supervisor didn't want to, she wanted to postpone the seminar, which meant actually postponing it to the next year. But I was following the weather and the news, and it was looking like the typhoon was going to go in a different direction and not affect us. And there weren't any actual of the warning signs that you usually see outside. So I, I tried to very politely suggest to her that we should move forward with the training anyway, because
Uh-huh.
it looked like this was going to blow over, and all the teachers were already on board and ready to go, and I didn't want to postpone it any longer. She didn't, and this was via text, and
Ah.
she did not respond. So I went ahead and reported to the school, and all the teachers came as planned. But because it's custom to wait for the district supervisor before, in that culture, you need to wait for the supervisor to arrive before you can begin. So we waited for probably close to an hour.
Oh no.
Team. And when she arrived, she made it very clear that she was not happy that I had decided to go forward with hosting it, and that I did not defer to her wishes to postpone.
Ooh.
And she issued a challenge to everyone in the room that this workshop had better be worth our time. um, so that wasn't how I wanted to get things started, but when I was invited to come up and begin, I just greeted them in the local dialect and said, good morning, and I'm thankful to God for all of you, because that was something that was appropriate for that culture, and it was very appreciated and well received, and really broke the tension, and everyone smiled. And then I just went ahead and jumped right in with high energy, with my agenda, got right into the content, and got right into the workshop, and smiled and had a high energy and stayed upbeat, and everyone kind of caught on to that tone that I set, and pretty soon teachers were laughing, teachers were engaging in the interactive content that I had prepared, um, and even my supervisor was smiling and looked like she was enjoying herself. But I realized after that I had actually made a taboo mistake, and I went ahead with doing something without deferring to my supervisor, and I could have handled it differently by maybe calling her and talking it through, or uh, making it having more of a dialogue rather than just making an executive decision on my own. uh, so I learned from that experience that it's always critical uh, to maintain open communication, so that everyone can come to an arrangement that's going to work for everyone.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Nice job. Very nice job. Um,
Was it
folks, if
too
you have,
long? I felt like
sorry.
it was a little long.
I wouldn't go any longer. I don't, but I think you maintained the interest because it was, I mean, like I was thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? This, you had it was a compelling story, and so I think I think you did a good job with that. You could perhaps make it slightly less, but I would not have said as feedback, oh, it's too long, you need to shorten it.
Okay.
Um, Anyone else thoughts that you have on that? Go ahead and you can put them in the chat box, and I'm gonna, while I start to give feedback to Laura here as well, if you noticed anything about it and want to comment on it or ask questions about it, that's great. So I was jotting some notes. I don't know if you heard my pen, it was quite loud on
Yeah.
cardboard here, but I just because it helps me, like when I say, and I'm going to do this really quickly because I know it's almost 8:30 already. But as a PCV in Philippines, we often, I did many workshops for teachers, and there was one that was rescheduled multiple times, and if it wasn't going to happen that time, it wouldn't have happened. And you went into, there's a typhoon warning, which is actually quite common. My supervisor wanted to postpone it, and I really wanted to just go through with it, especially given the weather and the warning signs and all of that. And so I tried politely suggesting blah blah blah. She didn't reply, and then we all were waiting, and then she came, and I just was very upbeat and just went through with it. I think I'm not going to do the rest. I'm say the rest, but I think you did a good job of you used it. We haven't talked about it yet in this one, but the STAR methodology, the situation, the task, the action you took, and the results, right? Like you really covered each. You spent some time on the setup, not too long on that, right? Then it was kind of that, okay, what was the task or the challenge? The typhoon possibility, and this whole, are we going to have it or not, and whatever, and the action you took, in going through. And it was kind of a bold action, right? I mean, especially in, it sounds like, that culture, right? And then but it sounds like that in the end, the results, the teachers came, I made it extra this, that, and the other, and they really were smiling. And even I liked that you said even the supervisor was smiling, and I knew in that moment that she was okay with this or whatever. Now my question is, in that society, is it appropriate to, and I don't know if you did, but did you apologize in part, in some way of saying, I'm sorry, I, might have been, overly whatever. Did you ever do that, or was it appropriate, or maybe it didn't need to be done because she was on board then?
I'm trying. I was actually, as I was concluding the story, I was trying to remember what follow-up we had, if any.
Yeah.
I think that she might have commented to me privately later. I
Yeah.
honestly don't remember because it was so long ago.
Sure, no problem.
I don't
What I was going to say is, for this story, if it were that you went to her and apologized, that I apologize, I really felt that it strongly that the typhoon wasn't going to be coming, with whatever, and I knew that if this didn't happen this year, it wouldn't be this whole year, and so it was really important to me, and thank you for coming, for whatever, you could do that in the end if you wanted. But I think you did a great job. I mean, that was that you followed the the STAR methodology, whether or not you knew it, and worked through it. So thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Lydia says, I thought you had some great context, and I like that you included lessons learned. Yeah, I always like the lessons learned from that, right? Because it's not always that, oh, and what I did was, I'm so great, you're not, you're being very, humble. But, in that whole, like, lessons learned, like, here's what I learned from that situation and how I could have handled it differently. But I am, I'm proud of the fact that I did go ahead with it because it did happen, and, the typhoon didn't happen, and blah, 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 blah. And, I was very, thankful, that kind of thing. So awesome. Interesting story. Someone else said, Lexi said, so that's great. There's some good feedback in there. Thank you, everyone. That's awesome. Great. So again, just to come back to kind of the conflict in a team environment and how you handled it, like another example might be something like this. Like, when I was in grad school, sure, I've, now when it's a negative thing like conflict, you don't want to come out with your like, oh, I have years of experience dealing with conflict, because in that sense, then it's like, oh, is that because he produces conflict? So you might say, certainly I've worked in, many different areas and such. And, certainly in a team environment, on occasion, there, will be some sort of a conflict. Let me tell you about one example. When I was in graduate school, I was working on a team project with 4 people, and it was a group project. And, we were to meet, and each person bring their, what they've been doing. And very early on in the semester, it became very apparent that one of the teammates was not really pulling her weight. She wasn't coming prepared. And, it just, we didn't, and the other ones were getting really upset about it. And so here's what I did. I called a meeting for, all of us just as a check-in. How are things going? What are we, what are we facing? What's, whatever. And in that environment, the person came out and explained that her mother had just died. And so obviously the rest of us understood that you're not going to be in your best, academic performance right after your mother dies, right? So what we decided to do was we reassigned the roles. We gave her a greater role in the presentation at the end of the semester more, and we took on, each of the three of us took on more of the research so that she could have the space that she needed to grieve, go home, do what she needed to, and come back. And I'm proud to say that we got an A on the whatever, blah, blah, blah. So that's the outcome, right? So that's another example of how you might address conflict in a team environment, right? You don't want to badmouth anyone. Oh, there was one person who was just not doing anything. She was awful, da, da, da. Even if that is maybe more of the truth, you want to remain really professional. And because otherwise they kind of think, oh, well, how are they going to explain me? Like, how are the boss, like, wow, they're really, berating their former employer. How will they describe me when they leave? They get, kind of freaked out about it. So awesome. All right. So let's move forward to get to some of those other questions. Thanks again, Laura. I really appreciate your help there. Responding to behavioral questions, what I was talking about with the STAR methodology, right? What's great about it is, you give the situation, right? You provide that context. That's kind of that preface, if you will. What happened, and then that task. You're talking about the problem or the challenges that you faced, right? So in Laura's story, it was the whether or not this workshop was going to take place because it was a typhoon warning and the person didn't want to allow it, and whatever. Your action, what's the action you took, right? And to solve this issue or to move forward. And then what are the results, most importantly, right? Or just as importantly, what are the outcomes, the results, numbers when you can. So that's great. So that's how you respond to behavioral questions. So really think about using this, when you are faced with behavioral questions. And like this one says in the beginning, the prepare, like listen to the question, think of an event, and it says plan, organize in 5 to 8 seconds. 8 seconds is actually a pretty long time. They talk about how when you're presenting and you ask for audience, you should give 7 seconds. And that is a very painful 7 seconds oftentimes, but before people might, agree to help or whatever. So in the same thing here, if you're in front of people who are looking at you and you're taking, this time, 8 seconds might feel kind of long, but but by doing the preface, what I talked about before, which is really the situation here, right? You're buying a little extra seconds to even think about what that example you're going to share is. So it might be, sure, I'm happy to give you an example of a time I worked with program management. I've done that in each of my 3 past jobs. And then when I was working in wherever, and then going into that, by the time you get done kind of saying that preface, you probably have the example. And so it's very comfortable to just move into that, which is great. So it can really help you in interviews. Okay, great. So dealing with not wanting to boast, because let's face it, a lot of times I think people are, we know that in a job interview, you're supposed to go in, you're supposed to really share your best. You're supposed to share, your information, you're supposed to, your skills, you're supposed to talk about how great you are, right? And that can be hard sometimes for people, that they feel like they're being very boastful, right? So sometimes this is just a slide that I wanted to, this graphic here, to share with you. Just, this is something that maybe it makes it easier for you when you're thinking about your confidence, and you're asked about your skills and stuff, right? So you could maybe instead of, well, I'm very good at this, or I'm excellent, my whatever skills are very good, that can sound very boastful. So maybe you could say it, in a different way, where it's, a little softer. I've always been told that my, blah 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 skills, are, really exceptional. And I've received that from coworkers, for example, when I worked in whatever, that kind of thing, right? Or I like to think that, or my colleagues comment that right. um so it can sometimes make it easier for you to talk better about yourself when you use one of those ways. But you're fine the other way too. You just don't want to come across as like, I'm so great, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, which obviously I don't think you would. All right, so let's talk more about difficult interview questions. Okay, so I have some that are up here. Tell us about yourself. And the reason I say that is, sometimes people feel like that's one of the hardest questions, because like, well, what do I say? I don't have forever, and how do I make it concise, right? So you know they struggle with that, right? What I say to people is, make it concise. Use some numbers if you can, right? I have 3 years of experience. I'm a bilingual project manager with 3 years of specialized experience in what, you can do it in different ways, right? There's some fun creative ways to do it as well. But if you're really pushed for time and you just want a few of those things, I have really enjoyed my job working in XYZ, and now I'm really excited to take those skills and parlay them into the blah 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 field that I'm so passionate about. And that's why I'm so interested in this opportunity. So I love ending it with that. And that's why I'm so drawn to or interested in this opportunity. It seems a perfect fit for me given my XYZ and blah, blah, blah. You want to really like hit them over the head in a nice way, right? That I'm really passionate about this. I'm excited about this opportunity, and, I'm a great fit based on right? So that's what I'll say about that one. I know there's several that you have in the chat box, so I want to maybe focus on those more to actually mock. So I'll just go through a couple of these and give you some insight. Why should we hire you? Sometimes they'll say, why should we hire you over the rest of our candidates? And quite honestly, you don't know what the rest of their candidates are. You have not seen their resumes, you have not seen anything. So you might even start with saying something like, well, without actually knowing the details of the other candidates, I certainly can share several things that I feel set me apart from the general public, or several skills that may set me apart. First, and then and you kind of prove it as I gained it, whatever. And so you go into that. Why should we hire you, right? And make sure you include your interest, your passion, if this is an area, especially important if you're going into a different area that you haven't worked in as much, and you're trying to make a case for how your transferable skills make you well qualified, and your passion for that makes you a good fit. So why did you leave your last company? And I think that was actually Laura again, wasn't it, Laura, that was yours?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I have a question for anyone else. Is anyone else interested in are you interested in doing a mock on this one? Or I can totally go either way. If somebody else wants to do it, if you want to do it, or if you want me just to share, it's up to you. Anyone else? Okay. So since nobody else wanted to go and you have already gone, Laura, if you'd like, I can just kind of give some guidance on this. And then if we have time in the end, we can mock it if others don't want, or you can stay on after, and I'm happy to mock it with you then as well. Okay. So when you talk about why did you leave your last position? Well, first of all, many of you might be evacuees. So that's an easy answer and quite a compelling one, right? Well, actually, I was evacuated due to COVID from my Peace Corps village in Ecuador and brought back here to the States. And, although I, was hopeful to be able to go back, it's, taking longer and such. And I really have decided at this point, I'm moving ahead, and I'm exploring opportunities. And that's why I'm so interested in this, whatever. So, but for other people, and especially if it was like a difficult one, you would never want to say, even if the truth be told, maybe your manager was this like overbearing, very, micromanager. I don't care how awful they are. You never know how small circles are, right? And you never want to give them the impression of, wow, they're just really raking her over or him over the coals. I wonder how they'd, do what they'd say about me when they leave, or what are they going to say? So instead, you want to maintain that like professionalism. You're not lying, you're just not going into the nitty gritty of everything, behind it, right? So, you might, I would point out what you valued about the experience. I was thankful to have gained experience, extensive experience in XYZ, which really honed my blah, blah, blah skills. And I'm now ready to move into the whatever sector that I'm so passionate about, and, whatever. So you could say that. Now, sometimes it's maybe you were let go, and that's actually it's much more common than we think. I forget the percentage of people who at some point in their life will be let go from a job. Um, and there's different reasons, right? But it could be your performance. It could be just not a fit. The organizational culture, you just weren't a fit. It could be you were let go because of, like reductions, COVID, other kind of recessions, things like that. So there's lots of different reasons, right? But there's different advice, on this. I mean, in general, the advice is to, be honest. And I think I actually have an entire slide on this one, with the like leaving, and why. So, but being honest, and talking, but not, you don't have to tell the whole truth, right? You can talk about how, it was, while I learned a great deal in XYZ, it really wasn't the right fit for me. I'm looking to work more in my passion area of blah blah blah, and so, it's a, so I'm excited to be at the point of exploring this opportunity, and I'm confident it would be an excellent fit or something like that. So, um, I'll go through the details in the other one as well, but tell us about a time. I think this one is tell us about a time you failed. Again, like the, weakness one, and we have a whole one on that too. You tell us about a time you failed. You don't ever want to say, oh, I've never failed. Oh, I'm, whatever. You want to be honest and genuine. Everyone's failed. We've all failed. The point is, and what they're looking for is somebody who can acknowledge and admit their shortcomings or their weaknesses or their failures. But more important than that, or just as important as that, is somebody who's able to, who addresses it then. Okay, so I've identified this is a weakness of mine, or this is a time I failed. And what did I learn from it? And kind of like what Laura was coming in the end. And here's what I learned about that from that experience. And going forward, I was very sensitive to XYZ. That's what they care about, right? And obviously you want to, choose an area that's not related much to the job. So like if you're talking about failing, you wouldn't want to be talking about failing doing something that you'd be expected to do in that job. It'd be better. I mean, you might, sometimes people say, like, when I first started in my position with I didn't have an understanding of XYZ. And so I struggled with that area. But here's what I did to get better at it. I took some self tutorials. I spent time with the other designers to talk to them about, how they dealt with it and got whatever. And I'm very proud to say that I came up to speed and became one of the top producers, as assessed by my manager or whatever the case is, right? So you want that kind of positive outcome or what you learned from it. Okay. Great. Okay. So other ones. So here, the biggest weakness, which is what I was talking about. One of the things I was talking about, you want to choose an actual weakness. Please don't do oh, I'm a perfectionist. I'm just going to do whatever it takes, wherever, and make it work, nights, weekends, whatever. Like that's not, people see through that. Like that's not and even if you do consider yourself a perfectionist and really, really don't use that one, because people will roll their eyes internally or externally. So that it's just been overused, and it's, so that whole like taking a strength and making it a weakness, like, oh, I'll just choose I'm so attentive to detail. I'm just, I'll do, like, and going into, you want to choose something that really is maybe, or was a weakness that's unrelated to the job. So never choose something that's related to the job. Choose something unrelated to the job, couch it in the past, and talk about how you've gotten better at it, not how you've mastered it and it's no longer an issue, because guess what? Then they can say, oh, great, well, tell me about one that still is a weakness. And then you got to go all the way back and start with a new one. Okay. So talking about how you're working on it, because that's what people want. They want to know that people can recognize their own strengths and weaknesses, and that they're the kind of person who's going to work on things that are, weaknesses to get better at them. They want somebody who's, wanting to do that. Right. So is there anybody, this was one of the biggest ones that came out, that does come out generally, and you all came up with it. Is there anybody else who would be interested in, mocking, that question really quickly? And we can certainly do one more. We can have this be the one that we do. What's your biggest weakness? Yeah, so either unmute yourself or just write in the chat box that you're willing to be our guinea pig, if you will. See, it wasn't that hard, was it? Was it, Laura?
No, not at all.
Thanks. All right. Let's see. Is there anyone who's willing to?
Can I ask a question about it, Jody?
Of course.
I mean, so just listening to you say, like, not have it relate to the job, what I've been doing is just sort of talking about hard skill sets, like for data analysis jobs.
Yep.
Like, oh, you don't need Python, but that's something everyone wants to learn. So I'll mention that. But I mean, what if, you need to have like entry-level skills in a certain platform? And I mean, could you say that you want to be proficient in those skills and continue to learn that platform? Would that be acceptable?
You could. What I might say is, maybe you say, in, something like in my last job, my most recent job, or my current job, if you're still in it or whatever, right? I utilize a lot of different platforms and such, but there's never really been, there's never really been the need to do pivot tables on Excel, for example. And so I hadn't learned that. And yet I do feel it's such a valuable skill to have, and very transferable. So here's what I've done to get better at that. I took a Coursera course in whatever, and just to get better. And I'm proud of the progress that I've made, and always looking to improve and myself in these areas.
That's great. I love it. I think I'll use that.
Okay. And sometimes, for example, there's something that you don't have, right? So if they say, tell me about your experience in, if it were worded as, tell me about your experience in pivot tables, right? You could say, well, although in my current role, I have not had the need to use pivot tables as much, I have clearly proven my skills and ability to learn new software such as blah blah, or you've done different kind of data things, you could say. And then and I've I've started, I've proven my ability to learn new tech skills very quickly, and I would be happy to take a tutorial, and I'm confident I would come up to speed in no time. That's if they ask you about it. You don't want to put that out there necessarily, unless you think that it's so, like, if it's maybe if there's that, if you're I just wanted to assure you, you don't necessarily want to draw the attention to it. Maybe they're not even looking at that, and there's no attention going to it. So you know what I mean? But if you feel like, oh, this is kind of holding back, you could offer that on your own in the end when they say, what questions do you have, for us, or is there anything else you want to tell us, about yourself? Then you could say, I consider myself a very, very proficient in, tech, in a lot of technology and such. And I've recently taken, it upon myself to get better at, pivot tables. And this is an area, and I'm, whatever, confident I'll come to speed, and I could come to speed in no time. So if you feel it's appropriate, but I would more do it when they push you on it. Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions on the weakness one, or how
Quick question.
Yeah.
Question. What if you used an example that was a bit more that was leaning more towards like soft skills, like a time perhaps that you made a mistake, and leaning more towards soft skills that has to do with like relationship management, right?
Uh-huh. So you're saying for the weakness question, if
Right.
using like I would say that would depend on, are you going for a managerial position? Because if you are, I wouldn't use a weakness in the managerial, like soft skill area.
Okay.
I
But
would I would try to choose a weakness that's unrelated. I mean, you don't want to say like, oh, I'm a crappy snowboarder. I mean, like that's, but you would want it to be something that's not directly a like something that's one of the requirements or what they're really looking for in that job. You want it to be a little more distance, because then they're not going to say, because otherwise, if you said something that's really related, it's like, oh, she doesn't have that. Well, this other candidate had a strong background in that. Maybe we should go with them.
okay. I was thinking more along the lines of um, making a like a just a mistake, like a cultural gaffe, and redirecting that, self-correcting it, having the conversation with the individual, and then like using that as and keeping in with cultural engagement, like how it was how it was a learning moment, and how
Oh yeah. Oh, you
it
could
gave me
totally do
the
that.
opportunity.
You
Yeah.
could totally do that. And because you're saying, when I first was, or when I was, new in my time, or, you could kind of couch it with that, or even, one of the biggest lessons I learned, that'd be a great one for the failure, right?
Right. Right.
When I initially came into the role of blah, 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 supervisor, and then you talk about that cross-cultural, whatever. And this is what I learned. I really felt bad about that happening. And here's what I committed to myself and to him, that this would not, whatever, and blah, 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 and what you've
Right.
done, and just be strong in that.
Yeah, because it was just it's something that actually happened and to me, and it gave me the opportunity to be educated about something else, and so that
Uh-huh.
it wouldn't be repeated in a social context. And
Yeah.
I didn't want
Yeah. No, I think that would be fine. Yeah,
okay.
I think that would be okay. Definitely. Hey, there's a comment here from, I think it's Ariana, that says, if someone asks this question, does that mean they're a lazy interviewer? Are you talking about the weakness question? Because I don't think it makes them lazy. It's very weakness. Yeah. No, actually, it's one of the it's definitely one of the most common difficult questions that are asked, is the weakness. They want to see how you see yourself, and can you acknowledge that you have weaknesses and such, and what do you do to try to get better at it, or do you say, oh yeah, I'm terrible in this, period. That's not what they want to hear. Okay, great. And I'm looking at the watch here, and I want to make sure we get a little more to the illegal questions before people might have to drop off at 9. I can stay on, but I just want to respect people's time as well. So, why did you leave your last job? I talked about that already, but the not lying, being positive, like I said, don't ramble, because when you ramble on and on, the more you ramble, the more you talk, the more it's just sounding like, oh, you're just not maybe sure what you're saying, or that kind of thing, right? And focus more on, like I said, the what you're excited about. Like maybe it's comparing or mentioning, the job, what you were in, but then you're really interested in this area, and you're excited to take your skills that you've honed in blah blah that company, or for X period of time, and really apply them to your mission that you're so deeply passionate about, or whatever it is. So great. I'm going to go on here. And again, you'll have access to this through looking at our global reentry, our playlist in YouTube as well. So illegal interview questions, I have some that are grouped here, only like to, fit different ways to group them. But, nationality, citizenship, they can't ask. I mean, these are illegal questions, and technically you have no need to answer these. The difficult part is, how do you say that professionally? How do you respond to that and not answer them, choose to not answer it, or answer it in part, but not the part that's illegal? And so some of the questions are things like, where are you from? What's your nationality? Like anything other than, are you legally authorized to work in the United States? That's author. They can say that, and they can ask that on their stuff, right? But you know, and sometimes these questions, they're not necessarily like trying to discriminate against you, right? Sometimes it might be, you know, an unseasoned, you know, interviewer who's, you know, saying something like, oh wow, I love your accent, where are you from? You know, they're just not thinking of that. And you know, but it is illegal. Gender or sexuality and age, you know, you know, all of those. You know, and the first one's very obvious. Do you think a woman can manage a largely male team? I mean, you know, that is kind of a blatant one, right? How old are you? Whatever. Lots of things. Disability and religion, both. You know, they can't ask what religion you are. You know, disability. I mean, there's special Schedule A hire for disability to help disabled persons get employed, but you know, they can't be asking it, you know, in interviews, things like that. Marital status, family, and pregnancy, a big one, right? And a lot of times people who are pregnant are, you know, blatantly, I mean, it's hard to, you can't hide that if you're in the third trimester, right? You're not necessarily able to hide that if you're, well, maybe on a Zoom one, but in person, right? So any questions about your pregnancy? Do you plan to continue working after, you know, having children? Do you plan to have children? When are you getting married? Are you, like, any of that? Are you married? These are all protected areas, status against for disability. So just, you know that. So responding to illegal questions, as I said, it's not always, you know, with the aim of, you know, discriminating, right? But sometimes you just have, you know, interviewers who just don't know better, and sometimes not. I mean, you know, so one of the things, you have a couple ways that you can respond, right? If there's an illegal question asked, you know, first of all, you could say, you know, that's an illegal question. Now, that's probably going to put the interviewer at odds, like, wow, they're, you know, confrontational or whatever. So I mean, you could decide that, you know, you want to up and leave and leave the interview. It's totally up to you, right? If it's a job that you really want, and I'm not saying you should just, you know, respond, you know, and answer the question. But if it is a job that you really want, and you think, you know, they're not necessarily maybe trying to discriminate, but just they're not, you know, knowing, you might very tactfully either, you know, you know, I'm, you know, sure, you know, my skills in this whatever are da, da, da. I'm not sure how my gender, or not gender, my whatever, you know, having children would impact that. You know, like, you know, this is, you know, I'm not sure how that would impact it. So, yes. So I'm sorry. Great. And then consider replying, but not directly. So when you're addressing it, you can certainly do that. And then asking yourself, you know, to think about, okay, how can I respond, you know, address this to raise the awareness so that they know that, you know, that it's not a legal question, but it's not said in a confrontational way, right? So think about how, you know, how you might do that in many of those questions. And you're going to have some resources on illegal questions as well, just to, you know, but certainly say, you know, I'm not sure how my performance would be impacted by that, you know, to put it back, and then they know, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, you know, whatever, they may, you know, apologize and go forth. Or, you know, where are you from? You know, you might decide to say California. How about you? I mean, you know, that's maybe where they spent time. Maybe they were born in Ecuador or somewhere else, but they're not replying to the, you know, nationality aspect of it. So there's lots of things that you can do to be professional, and yet not, do it tactfully, and yeah. That's what I'm going to say about that. Okay. So sometimes there's questions like, you know, what do you do in your free time? Which is a random question, right? Like, how do you respond to that, right? And that's more, I mean, there's some samples here that are given, right? The basketball, it's good fun, keeps me active. I enjoy playing as part of a team and challenging myself. That's a great answer, right? Maybe you love to read, and you, you know, I love analyzing, which is why I'm really drawn to more, you know, mystery and crime novels, you know, things like that. So you might share something like that. I mean, it could be something, it's a great opportunity to share something very unique about yourself. Maybe you have a unique skill or passion or something like that, that will help them to actually remember you. So, and I wanted to end just a little bit with, before we get into some of the more of your questions, and we'll go through and we'll, I'll give you feedback on those. The behavioral interview tips, just really using those specific examples and follow the star. It's make it fairly concise, right? And help them see it very easily. So great. So I want to go back up here, because in our chat box, I'm just going to go down in the order they came in, and we're going to look at these difficult questions that maybe we didn't talk about. We already talked about salary expectations at the very beginning. Why did you leave your last job? We did that. Yep, exactly. Describe some areas you need to improve in or weaknesses. We got that one. Now, let's see, what technical experience do you have for a program manager position not in the field? An interviewer did not elaborate and was hesitant to explain what they meant by technical. I see. Okay, great. So I didn't, and earlier when I said that, I think I said, oh, ask what they meant, but gotcha. In that case, I would assume that they'd be talking about like the technical, I don't know what kind of job it was, so it's hard to maybe gauge exactly, but what technical, like if you look at the job description, what are the technical experiences that are required or requested? Because sometimes they have their desired versus their required, right? So what technical experience do you have? And it's a different field. You'd want to really point out your transferable skills, which are many. If it's technical types of things, then look at, okay, maybe they use a certain, database, whatever, but you have experience in another one. Pointing out, if you're well-versed in one, let's face it, you can learn another one. It's not that hard, right? So letting them know, like, and that would be a perfect time to maybe bring in, so I have a great deal of technical experience in XYZ, in regard to, I did notice that your job, you work with, pivot tables or whatever it is, which I haven't worked as much with in my current role, but I have taken XYZ to comp speed, and am confident I could, I would do a great, I'm very ready and able to take on that part of the initiative as well. Something like that. Okay. Great. I think behavioral questions, tell us about a time when, so we've done, tell us about a time. We did a couple of those. We can come back and do some more as well. Name a time you failed. We talked about the weakness one. We didn't do the failed. We can do the failed here. Let me just get to the, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That's a good one. Yes. Easier for younger folks to answer. Marina, you're right in terms of, and that is a legal question, because they're not saying based on how old you are, but the reality is, if you are a seasoned professional, right, your trajectory and where you're looking to be in 5 years may be quite different than the young folks who are just coming in, who, have many, many years left in the, in the job market. Now, I think sometimes why they're asking that question is generally they want to see like where you see yourself going. Do you have a vision of where you want to go? Are you seeing this as a pit stop and you're just going to get in and out and get to your next rung on your ladder that you're climbing? Or are you really looking to immerse yourself and maybe grow within the organization? And if it's that, I would definitely take time to explain that, and you might even say, I am not a job skipper. I'm not the kind of person who, just takes a job and then runs. I'm looking for an opportunity to really commit myself to an organization, to learn with it, to grow with it, and to really remain, and helping in whatever way I can best help, and something like that, right? Where you're coming back with them to basically say, I'm not going to be running from you in a year, right? Now, one thing I want to point out for those of you who are younger and, seasoned professionals who might be doing some kind of graduate degree or thinking about doing a graduate degree, you don't want to say, oh yeah, next year I want to go to grad school. I'm going to grad school next year, for this, because then they're like, oh crap, we're going to have to train him, and then he's going to leave or she's going to leave, and they're going to go to grad school. So if you wanted to get that in there, grad school, you might say something about more that committing yourself, to an organization. In the longer term, you do want to complete a graduate degree. And that's why you're so excited that here in DC, there are so many opportunities that allow people to continue working in their full-time job and doing graduate school on a part-time evening basis, even, and remote. Something like that kind of reassures them that, you're considering, you're not lying, you're considering that. You may consider against that and take another one, but you're That's one of the things that you're looking at. So that can calm them down a bit about, oh, they're just going to be here and leave. So, okay. Let's go down here really quickly because I know we're at 9:08. I'm sorry here, folks. You can certainly leave if and when you need to, but you'll be able to access this later and the resources that I do follow up with. But let's see. They want the why this field, their position when you're transitioning. Yeah. That's similar to the other one, Lisa. I think that, this field or position when you're transitioning to a new field or role, especially when your field was impacted by COVID, so may not have been your choice. Yeah. I mean, I think people, I think you can be pretty honest. I mean, people understand like, wow, my industry was devastated by, COVID, and this has been a really difficult, pandemic for everyone. And at this point, I've decided to really take my XYZ skills that I've gained in that field and really looking to enter within blah, 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 this sector, or and whatever reason, if you have something else. But to say something like that, I think is well regarded. People understand that. It's like, oh yeah, that stinks. I mean, a lot of people lost their jobs from COVID, right? Completely. So don't worry too much about being unemployed this year since March or whatever it was, right? I mean, people are going to be looking, going, yep, COVID year, 2020, COVID. Like everyone understands, right? So don't beat yourself up if you've been unemployed for some time in this year, okay? And hopefully that will change soon. Questions around salary, we covered. Previous managers, yep, working relationships, that would be more of the conflict or the, getting along. If you've had a really good manager, I would also point that out, and say, I feel really fortunate in my current position or in my last position to have had a manager who, really believed in me and the team and really let us take the, whatever, an initiative and test things out, and I learned so much from them. And I'm very grateful, and now looking at what's next in this exciting area, and just being positive and upbeat. I mean, even with COVID, I know it's tough, and you say it, but you don't want to be that it's like, yeah, I was devastated, and here's what I'm doing as a result, and that kind of thing. Great. Let's see here. I'm just looking for other stories. I think we've gotten through so we can go back to one of them. Hold on, children. Yeah. Someone had put in here about children a long time ago. My then boss, he was known to be difficult, asked a female candidate lab tech about her marital status. Totally illegal. Did she have children? Totally illegal. Nowadays, the application would show the marital status, but not about children. He wanted to know if the candidate would work after hours and if there were children waiting for mom to be home. Oh my. Yeah. Yes, interviewers are not supposed to ask that question, and that's been the case for a long time. So yeah, yikes. I was told to use growth opportunity. Oh, for your weakness. I see this as a growth opportunity. Absolutely. You can refer to that as, one of the areas that I really, consider a growth opportunity for myself, or, I've considered as a growth opportunity for myself is XYZ. And I, blah, blah, blah. And here's what I've done. And kind of work on, how you've tried to get better at it too. So what should you do if you're asked an illegal question in an interview where they have to know that they're illegal? Like multiple specific questions about your religious beliefs. Oh, geez. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, I mean, you in that situation, if you've had, like if there are multiple questions and they're just really drilling about it, they should know. But even if they don't, I think that's appropriate then for you to say something, well, I'm not sure. You could either say, I'm not comfortable addressing that question as it's, you could say it's not allowed, or you could just say, I'm just not sure. Can you clarify for me how my response to this would impact the, like, how does this impact the work that I'd be doing, or the job, or something, like because you go back and question them, just say, I'm just not sure how religion and whatever would impact my work performance. And they're going to, I mean, even if they're, clueless, And then you say that, they should be like, oh yeah, religion, right, okay. And if they don't, then maybe it's not someplace that you want to work with either, right? I mean, and you do have that right to say, I'm sorry, but that's not a permitted question, and I'm not comfortable. But otherwise, just to say, I'm not comfortable answering that question. I don't, it's not that I don't see it has any impact on my performance and as an employee, prospective employee, or whatever. So I would just do that. Okay, great. Lydia, no problem. Great. I'm so glad. So those of you who are here, let me know if anyone wants to mock one of the questions. I'm happy to do that. I'm going back to the one about, what was it? Was it name a time you failed? And I do think that we did kind of answer that with the weakness, but the time you failed, like couching it in the past, what you learned from it, and how you've changed since, or how it's impacted how you've done your subsequent work or whatever, right? Decisions you've made in the future. Like because that's the whole, what they want to really see is that you learn from mistakes, that you're not going to just continue to make them. You learn from mistake, you do what you need to right the wrong or get better at, or whatever it is, right? And then go from there. Okay, great. Anyone interested in mocking? And no problem if not. I just want to put it out there. I'm happy to. And the other thing I do want to say to you is, when you all have job interviews, now I can't do one for everyone, like every job that you're applying for. But if you have a job that you get adequate notice about when the interview is going to be, contact me and put in the subject line, mock interview request. And I do them. I much prefer to do them when it's for a real job that you're prepping for, right? Versus doing a mock one where we're pretending, only because it's much stronger and I can't do two with one person. So just because of shortage of time. But so I really prefer to do it when you have like the best time to do it is 1 to 2 days before the actual interview, because then it's freshest in your mind and you'll be able to do better. Okay. So I'm happy to do that with you is what I'm saying. And just reach out to me and let me know. I'm here to help. Please do let us know if there are other webinar topics. I'm in the process of finalizing my December schedule. We've already done the first 2 weeks, but I'm doing the last. Are there specific topics that you want covered? Put them in the chat box here or drop me an email. You have my emails in the chat box here too. I will put it in here again. You can certainly shoot me an email and I will be happy to add that and just put, like webinar topic. That's my shortened one there. Okay. And we'll try to get it worked in. I mean, I'm finalizing this in the next day or so, but if there are certain topics that you want or a refresh on, we've done so many. I mean, we do, 2 a week and then the podcast. So, and I've tried to do different topics every time, maybe different twists on certain topics, so that it's not just doing, interviewing the same content. I tried to swap it up for y'all. Okay. So anyone interested in doing a mock-up? Last call, unmute yourself if you're interested. And I'm going to, meanwhile, shut off the recording. Okay, let me just, all right. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you sometime soon. Bye-bye.